WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Helps if I have my mic up. So good morning again, everyone. Yeah, it's the opening day of the 2026 World Cup, in addition to everything else going on in basketball and in life. Later today, Mexico and South Africa will kick off at the Azteca in Mexico City. The tournament will eventually sprawl across 16 cities in Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Will you be watching? You can catch the action in a living room or bar, literally all over the world, which is exactly the point that Franklin Foer made 22 years ago when he wrote How Soccer Explains the World, an Unlikely Theory of Globalization. Though soccer wasn't as big in the United States at that point, Foer's argument was that it was actually the most advanced expression of globalization on Earth, with all the money flowing through it, the tribalism inside it, and the politics complicating it. That was 2004. Now it's 2026, and some of the players representing their countries at this World Cup play for teams like Saudi-owned Newcastle United, or United Arab Emirates-owned Manchester City. Really? Did you know that? Oh, and of course Iran, which the U.S. is currently at war with. How Soccer Explains the World has a new edition out with a new preface, and there has perhaps never been a better moment to revisit it. Franklin Foer is a staff writer at The Atlantic and author of several books, including World Without Mind and The Last Politician Inside Joe Biden's White House. He's also written a recent piece in The Atlantic called The Quintessential Trumpian Sport. Spoiler alert, it's a pretty dark version of Trump's interest in soccer, and we'll talk about it. Hi, Franklin. Welcome back to WNYC.
So good to be here. You know, I haven't been looking forward to this World Cup because of all the external political circumstances around it. But your enthusiasm about last night's Knicks victory is really it's setting the mood here, and you're getting me pumped up for a sports extravaganza. So thank you.
I knew he had a function in the world. I just didn't know until now what it was. But seriously, how does soccer explain Franklin Foer? What's your relationship to the game that led you to write this book 22 years ago and revisit it now?
So when I was a kid, I just have the most vivid memories of watching the 1986 World Cup and the 1990 World Cup. And when I would look into the stands and I would see kind of the raw passion, which was also so clearly related to global events, when England is playing Argentina just after they'd fought the Falkland Wars. And, there were all these rivalries between countries that had fought in World War II, and those rivalries were being played out in the soccer stands and on the field. There was something just intoxicating to me about it. In some ways, it stood in contrast to a lot of what I was experiencing in American sports, that there was no need to have a scoreboard tell people what to say or cheerleaders to gin up a crowd. And there was something sometimes even dangerous about the passion. And so I felt when I was watching games like I was opening up the atlas, but I was doing much more than just looking at geography. I was kind of pouring into culture, into history, and the game itself is magnificent, but it was really having that extra overlay that I found just so fascinating, and it just enraptured me. And so 20 years ago, I was able to go on this great little mini epic for myself where I traveled the world, and each place I went, I tried to kind of extract some sort of lesson about the globalized world we're living in and how we think about ourselves and our identities, even as we become interconnected in the most profound ways.
Yeah, and you're right. When I wrote How Soccer Explains the World some 2 decades ago, I admittedly failed to anticipate the day when foreign governments would own English soccer clubs. But the thesis of the book was that the global game of soccer was a leading indicator of the future, as you've just been explaining a little of. Soccer was globalization and capitalism in its most advanced form, you write. And I guess even if you couldn't anticipate a Saudi-owned Newcastle United or United Emirates owned Manchester City, which of course are British soccer teams.
Yes.
What did you see as the most emblematic of globalization in the world of soccer back then?
Well, the thing that was fascinating to me was the way in which, things can get big but still remain intensely small and intensely passionate. So even as you had the rise of global super teams in the form of like Barcelona or Manchester United, there was still something both rooted about those teams and rooted about those passions. I think one of the promises of globalization in its kind of most cheerleader form was that by becoming interconnected, we would get along. That the famous theory about McDonald's, countries never fighting wars against one another, that's not true. That just hasn't turned out to be the case. It seems like in a globalized world, nationalism in both its most beautiful forms and its most dangerous forms has thrived, and you could see that through soccer.
You write that the story begins bleakly and grows progressively more optimistic. I mean, it certainly starts bleakly with Red Star Belgrade, Serbian ultras. Ultras are basically organized groups of supporters known for their fanatical support, and the Balkans War. This is back in the 90s. So take us back there. Why was that the best place to start?
Well, I just found it kind of incredible that you had a team whose fan bases were kind of mobilized to become genocidal paramilitaries. And I narrated the story of this club, Red Star Belgrade, which had been owned by a Serbian warlord and had been turned over to his widow. He was assassinated. His widow, who was kind of the Madonna of Serbian pop, took over the club. And I went and I visited with the fans who were associated with these groups that had been mobilized when Serbia first went to war, as Yugoslavia was disintegrating. And these fan groups became shock troops who were sent out to do a lot of the early dirty work of ethnic cleansing. And it was just such an amazing story to me about how the passion of fans, obviously these were fans who existed at the very, very end of a spectrum, who were engaged in violence as part of their fandom on a regular basis, could then be taken from this one context where their behavior, while bad, was relatively contained and innocuous, and then be immediately shifted into this other context where they could do something that was world historically terrible.
Listeners, we can take your calls for Franklin 4 on the reissue of How Soccer Explains the World, 212-433. WNYC, are you planning to go to a World Cup match? Are you following any particular country? On the bigger questions that Franklin raises, do you see soccer as a window into globalization and world politics? Or is the beautiful game for you kind of a refuge from all of that? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692, and we will definitely get to his article on where Trump comes in with, the kind of dark headline. Well, the headline doesn't really tell you how dark the article is, but the headline is the quintessential Trumpian sport. All right, let's just do that now. You write, however alien the world's most popular sport might seem to many of the president's boosters, Trump's relationship with soccer is not a contradiction of his politics, but an expression of them. How so?
I'm sorry, Brian. Could you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I know we had a little line glitch there. in your article, your new article in The Atlantic, The Quintessential Trumpian Sport,
yeah.
you wrote,
So,
however alien the world's most popular sport may seem to many of the president's boosters, because they see it as un-American, right? Trump's relationship with soccer is not a contradiction of his politics, but an expression of them. So I'm asking, how so?
yes. Okay. So one of the really strange facts about American soccer is that it has been the subject of the culture war here. And if you went back to the mid-1980s, Jack Kemp, I'm sure that name will mean something to some people, who was the Republican candidate for vice president, congressman from Buffalo, was a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He denounced soccer on the floor of the House as being this alien socialistic force that was crowding out our indigenous games. And there is this rich history on the right of conservatives denouncing soccer as being kind of foreign and is taking away audience from baseball and other things that are traditionally American. Trump comes at soccer differently. For starters, he grew up in New York in the 1970s when Pele was playing for the New York Cosmos. And so he associates soccer with glamour and being a tough ticket. But then there's this fact that soccer, especially in the form of FIFA, the international governing body of the game, there is all of this patronage and corruption that is associated with it. There's so much money that flows through FIFA and so many opportunities for corruption. And in fact, the United States had played a very important role in trying to contain the corruption of FIFA when the rest of the world let this corruption slide by. The FBI investigated it. The Department of Justice indicted some of the more corrupt functionaries associated with the game. But when Trump has come to power, both in his first term and especially in this second term, he's aligned himself with FIFA. The president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, looks at Trump and he sees somebody he can do business with. And I think Trump looks at him and sees the same. And so Infantino became a regular visitor at Mar-a-Lago when Trump introduced his board of peace in Gaza and had this meeting of world leaders in Egypt. There was Infantino standing by his side. Infantino was at the Trump inaugural. And I think that they look at this tournament and they see this kind of incredible opportunity. For Trump, it's an opportunity to kind of briefly play the role of president of the world and to insert himself into the center of a global narrative. And for Infantino, this is a tremendous money-making opportunity. And so it's not a marriage of convenience. It's a marriage of two people who see themselves in each other.
So I guess it was Infantino who came up with this infantile decision after Trump thought he should have been given the Nobel Peace Prize to create a FIFA Peace Prize and give it to Donald Trump. And for listeners who don't know, that actually happened.
That happened, and we don't know exactly the criteria for the Peace Prize, but we've nominated you for it next year, Brian. But there was this, Infantino is willing to go to great lengths in order to tend to Donald Trump's ego. That Peace Prize is kind of the most epic display of that. But there was a Club World Cup that was held in the United States last year, and Chelsea, the team from London, won the tournament. And when they won, Trump not only handed them the trophy, he was able to sit on the stage as the Chelsea players celebrated as if Trump himself had won the match and was accumulating all this glory. And then there's this image, it's hard to shake, where the winners' medals are being distributed and Trump puts one of them in his pocket. And Trump asked Infantino if he could have a replica of the Club World Championship trophy for himself, and he was given one. And so Infantino understands the mind of Donald Trump, and he understands its boundless ego, and he's willing to do what it takes to make Donald Trump feel like he is a trophy winner himself.
If we stipulate that the United States is more unpopular around the world in the Trump era than it has ever been, does this backfire on Infantino and FIFA?
Well, I think there are risks. So one risk is that they don't make as much money as they hope because they overprice the tickets. I don't think that that's actually going to be the case because they were able to sell so many tickets at such insane prices. But you look at some of the stadiums for pretty good games. I just thought that England's game in Texas, first game in Texas, still has unsold tickets because they've been priced so high. And so I think the possibility of having unfilled stadiums is not a great look for FIFA. We've seen the ways in which fans have not been admitted into the United States, which I think is shameful. If you're going to host this kind of world gathering, this one event every 4 years where everybody turns on their television set and focuses on the same thing, to exclude fans, I think is shameful. There was a referee from Somalia who was who the administration said had ties to terrorists who they didn't let in, and I just saw that UEFA, the international governing body of soccer, which is not known for its high ethics, just assigned this referee a match in order to show solidarity with him. So yes, I think that there is a way that there is a possibility that this could backfire. But let me just say one other thing, which is that the last World Cup was in Qatar, where there were hundreds of people, maybe thousands, who died in the construction of stadiums where gay fans were threatened with arrest. The World Cup before that was in Russia, where Vladimir Putin presided in imperial fashion. Every World Cup tends to begin with political controversy in the sense that the corruption and the autocracy are somehow going to wreck the spectacle. But in the end, the world is so addicted to soccer, loves it so much, that it tends to set aside whatever moral qualms it has and submits to the pleasure of the game.
Listeners, if you're just joining us, we have a few more minutes with Franklin Foer, staff writer at The Atlantic, on the new edition of his book, How Soccer Explains the World, an Unlikely Theory of Globalization, here on day one of the World Cup. And Ray in Westchester, you're on WNYC with Franklin Foer. Hi, Ray.
Hi, Ray. Hi, thank you for taking my call, Brian. I had two comments. One is that I am dreaming about a rematch of Netherlands versus Spain in the final. Netherlands is a team that I support, although I'm originally from Iran, but I do not support that team since it doesn't represent the people of Iran. But Netherlands twice made it to the final in the 70s, 74, 78, and then in 2010 against Spain when they lost. And I'm just hoping that they'll be able to make it this time. My other comment was regarding soccer being, it is definitely more than a sport these days. It is being used as politically, socially, and if you look at countries that qualify to the World Cup every 4 years, they're the ones that are more stable, they're doing well economically and socially, and those are the countries that make it to the World Cup in general. Iran being an exception this year because it was an easy path to get to the World Cup for them, so they didn't have much trouble. Yeah, so that was my comment. I also have tickets to Game 76 after the group stage and quarterfinal, and waiting for a confirmation for a final game, which I have paid for it 6 months ago, but I haven't got the final confirmation on that yet.
What would that ticket cost? I'm curious. Or what did it cost? It sounds like you were able to get it at face value.
It was $6,900 for a ticket, but
Wow.
It's all the way up, on the top.
Ray, thank you very much. Well, there's globalization at work, Franklin, right?
Well, you have an Iranian fan supporting the Netherlands, and I do think that is one of the fascinating things, is that especially in the United States, where we're such a multicultural country, but also we know that I support the United States team, and I would be thrilled if the U.S. men's team made it to the quarterfinals, but I'm pretty sure that's about as far as they're able to make it. And so I think a lot of American fans tend to have secondary teams that they support. And that's true, I think, around the world. And I think that is kind of, in and of itself, it's like this interesting study in the way that we are able to choose our identities. I'm afraid I don't really think that there is much of a hope of a Dutch Spanish rematch in the final. Spain is one of the teams that's expected. Spain is one of the two favorites in this tournament, and I don't think it would be any surprise if they made it all the way. They have a terrific teenager named Yamin Lamal who's playing, although he's been a little bit hampered by injuries. But they have kind of an egoless team that's played together for several years. They're incredibly technical. And that matters in the United States because one of the other ways in which politics intersects with this World Cup is that we are always going to be playing games from now on in an era of global warming. And it's going to be one hot tournament. And the heat is going to transform the way that teams play. It's going to impose constraints on them. And the teams that are able to best master the heat have a better shot at advancing.
The caller was Iranian, and one of the stories so far is that the U.S. and the Trump administration are only allowing Iran on U.S. soil for 24-hour windows, meaning the players, 24 hours at a time. The team is based in Tijuana, commuting across the border to play matches in Los Angeles and Seattle, the way I understand it. And then they have to leave and go back to Mexico the next day. Trump said Iran is welcome at the tournament, but that it might not be appropriate for them to be here. So what is that situation playing out at a sporting event in real time when the two countries are at war? Tell us about globalization and soccer, if anything.
Right, and those two countries have a decent chance at meeting in the elimination phase of the game. But wow. What Trump has imposed does not feel to me like it's done in the spirit of sportsmanship or a fair and equal playing field. There is a fascinating history of Iranian soccer going back to even just the arrival of soccer in Iran, where it was something that came into the country with English railroad workers. It's something that has always been associated with an idea of the Iranian nation that was not the Islamic Republic's version of the Iranian nation. In fact, kind of initially, the Islamic Republic had taken steps to try to tamp down enthusiasm for the game. And in the late 1990s, celebrations of the Iranian performance turned into demonstrations against the regime. And it's frequent. It's been frequent during World Cups that you'd had Iranian supporters flash signs, chant slogans that were against the government, and with the hopes that audiences back home would receive them. And I don't know if you remember this, that this became a controversy during the last World Cup, where there were protests against back in Tehran because a woman had been murdered by the morality police. And during the first game, there were Iranian players who hadn't sung the national anthem in order to stage their own protest. And then the government applied a lot of pressure on those players to sing the national anthem. And so when we talk about Iranian soccer, we're in a realm where politics is always being contested. And it feels to me like Trump is maybe missing a trick by treating the team in this vindictive sort of way, that if he was able to kind of let the team participate fully, equally, without the United States seeming to unfairly punish them, maybe there would be a chance for some positive political developments to flow from it.
This even brings us back to the Knicks in a certain way, because there's this buzz, especially on the right, about Wembanyama being absent or folding his arms during the Star Spangled Banner. And
no,
So you just thought I was going to find my way back to the Knicks one way or another, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, what's the convention there? Because Wembayan is French, and if a team from another country comes here, or if a team from here goes to another country, to play in an international soccer match like in the World Cup, is it custom for the visiting team to put their hands over their hearts or whatever it is when the home country's national anthem is being played?
No, players tend to kind of stolidly stand there, just kind of eyes shot forward. But there is a tradition, which I don't especially care for, of opposing fans whistling during the other team's national anthem. That there's not a deference that's inherently paid to the singing of a national anthem. So I mean, to me, the anthem is actually one of the reasons I always watch. I always make sure that I'm at my set for when the anthems are played, because I love the imagery from it all. I love the passion that you see when fans sing their anthems. I am always curious to see how players respond. And then it just kind of tangentially to this, I think that diasporas play such an important and unpredictable role in the performance of a World Cup team. I just saw a study that the University of Zurich published, where there's certain countries like France or the Netherlands that have that are colonial nations that have done a much better job of integrating immigrants from their colonies into their teams. And that obviously strengthens those nations, but it does come at the expense of the countries that the parents of those players came from. Or then there are other countries like Morocco, which is assembled largely from the Moroccan diaspora and was able to make it to the semifinals of the last tournament. So all of these political issues, which are so potent in our own domestic context, actually inform the performance of these nations at the World Cup.
Comment that came in a text. The famous Uruguayan writer Edward Galeano said that football is a reflection of ourselves and our societies. So football is whatever we are. That's a good quote to bring forward. Another listener writes, how does the guest book and recent work build on the contrast Bill Buford's classic, Among the Thugs, makes? The book, Through Soccer Fandom, explains a lot of humanity's attributes, tendencies, and flaws. We'll take that as a rhetorical question. And one more caller before we run out of time and move to our Nick's Rhymes call-in segment. Bilal in West Windsor, you're on WNYC. Hi, Bilal, we have 20 seconds for you.
Hi, Brian. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I'll just get into my thoughts. I wanted to share my thoughts on more of like the broader picture over here, which is around like the Americanization of soccer. I think soccer has long been a refuge from real life. It's always been a sport for the working class, and even today, if you look at the most popular leagues like the EPL in England, tickets for locals are still at 30 to 45 pounds per game. And these are internationally followed clubs with like 60,000 capacity stadiums. And we've seen how capitalism is impacting that. There are protests happening right now by fans of these English clubs because their American owners are converting more and more of these 60,000 seats into hospitality seats, which are open for anyone to buy and cost $400 to $500 a pop, and sometimes even north of that. And so we're seeing that this particular World Cup is sort of like a culmination of that, and any pundit or ex-soccer player that you listen to has the same narrative to share. It's too expensive for the traditional fans to now go and watch all of the games of their teams. And that doesn't, the ticket prices don't even include the flights that those fans will have to take in order to follow their team to different cities. And they're contrasting it with the last World Cup in Qatar, where accessibility was great, from ticket prices to cheaper hotels. Fans didn't have to take flights, and that kind of like goes for the soccer teams as well. They didn't have to take like flights to travel to different games, which is what they're claiming also resulted in better games on the pitch. And that's not even going into like the political circus caused by the current White House. So I think just the overall kind of situation of the Americanization of soccer, this is kind of like a culmination of it.
Bilal, thank you very much. Well put, right, Franklin? We have about half a minute for a last thought.
Yeah, well, it's also, I mean, I think this is the globalization. As soon as the English Premier League became this thing that you could access on television in any country in the world, it transformed the economics of the game. It took something that was profoundly local, that was profoundly working class, and it made it this path to the most fantastic profits. And he's also correct that private equity, American private equity, has descended into the game, and it's one of the things that I didn't write about in 2004 because it hadn't happened, and now it is a dominant reality.
Franklin Foer, staff writer for The Atlantic, and author of How Soccer Explains the World, an unlikely theory of globalization. New edition out now. Also see his new article in The Atlantic, The Quintessential Trumpian Sport. Franklin, fascinating. Thanks for some time today. Maybe you'll even come back before the end of the tournament if there are other thoughts we can plug into this.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you.